The holidays are here. During this time of year, many gather with family and friends to celebrate the joys of the season. While there are many laughs and smiles, there are also several stressors. There are gifts to buy, meals to prepare, and homes to decorate. We want everything to be just right, which only adds to the strain we feel. And for those who've recently lost a loved one, celebrating in this month can feel particularly daunting. If you find yourself feeling uneasy for whatever reason, Dr. Mary Lamia, a practicing clinical psychologist and professor at the Wright Institute in Berkeley, California, has some tips to help you get through the season's ups and downs.
When you think about it, whether it's grief or stress or whatever we feel during the holidays, it's not the fault of the holidays. We make it the fault of the holidays because they're upon us. We have expectations of ourselves during the holidays and think people have expectations of us. And that's what causes stress. You know, it's between us and what we think others expect and what we expect. And so the best way to manage stress is to take a look at what you're expecting of yourself. And if that's manageable, and if you can't afford to buy the kinds of presents you want to buy for people, to lower your own expectations.
Lamia is also the author of Grief Isn't Something to Get Over, Finding a Home for Memories and Emotions After Losing a Loved One. She knows the feeling of grief firsthand. She lost her mother when she was a little girl, her father when she was a teenager, and then, quite unexpectedly, her beloved husband, Fred, died of a stroke. She says that when we dread the holidays, it's not truly about the holidays at all.
What we dread is what we feel. We dread feeling those feelings of loss, of being without, or the memories of something or someone during the holidays, or the memories of bad holidays, whatever it is. We dread what we feel. And so it is important to take a look at, what are you dreading? It's not Christmas or Hanukkah or New Year's or Thanksgiving. You're dreading what you feel and why.
Lamia says she plans to enjoy the holidays this year by remembering fond memories of her husband. This might lead to some tears, but that's okay. She says that people can still celebrate the holidays by sharing and embracing their feelings rather than avoiding them.
I have an uncle who did it right. He was able to carry on a very happy conversation and bring up somebody who died, cry a little bit, then go on with the happy conversation. And if one could pull that off, it works. But we don't have to hold back on what we feel. We could say, I miss so-and-so, and then go on.
Lamia says it's important to allow those who are grieving to express their feelings, rather than expect them to keep their grief silent. For many, the holidays, after all, are when many are surrounded by their loved ones after some time apart. Families, friends, and even colleagues can help by sharing their own memories of the deceased, rather than interrogating the mourning person by asking how they're doing.
To say instead, I had this sweet memory of your husband, and I remember when we were doing whatever we were doing, to bring up your memory and the grief you feel about that positive memory, rather than interrogating the grieving person about how they're doing. Because they're not going to tell you how they're doing, really. They might say, I'm doing great, I'm not doing great, I'm doing horribly, but instead to share.
The bereaved person may encounter people who mean well when they say it's time to put your grief aside and move on. Lamia says there's no getting over grief because it's impossible to erase memories and feelings. Sometimes a grieving person just wants some acknowledgement of the sadness and pain they're feeling.
Don't ever tell anybody to get over a loss, because that is very shaming to them, or they think something is wrong with them. People believe they have to go through various stages in order to process grief. That really doesn't exist. There's been 20 years of research papers showing that that doesn't happen. We don't get over grief mainly because we have memory, and we remember the person who has died, and we remember how we feel. And we have triggers in our environment that remind us of that person, that activate all of our memories. I guess rather than tell somebody they need to get over it and move on, they need to take it with them and move on.
While feelings of grief may become muted over time, some people feel acute pain for years, to the point that they become disabled and unable to carry out day-to-day activities. They may even develop suicidal ideation. Such symptoms are called prolonged grief disorder, which was added in 2022 to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, published by the American Psychiatric Association. While Lamia doesn't entirely agree with the description of prolonged grief disorder, she says this new diagnosis allows people to receive extended insurance coverage for much-needed grief therapy.
It's one thing to have pain and be able to function. It's another thing to have pain and want to be in bed all day or want to commit suicide. I don't agree with some aspects of that diagnosis because it's understandable how somebody would have intense suffering, let's say if their child dies. Child loss is probably the worst that people can feel. It's horrible. Another is losing a soulmate. And it doesn't really take into consideration, when we think about grief as a disorder, we don't take into consideration what attachment does to people when we attach to somebody. And if you are in a long-term relationship with somebody you regard as a soulmate and then they die, part of you, your identity is gone as well because we're wrapped up with that person.
Lamia says that when someone we love dies, our memory is primed to look for symbols that remind us of that person.
And yellow butterflies and hummingbirds, whatever it happens to be. There's a way in which grief makes us seek. Grief makes us look. There's a yearning and a longing to restore a lost connection, to repair a broken bond. And yet that's impossible with loss. So we do that by finding symbolic ways to keep our loved ones with us. So that we're seeking, and the yellow butterfly is there.
This holiday season, whether you're stressing over everything you still have to do, or you just don't feel like you're in the right headspace, a change of attitude may help. Keep it simple. Honor your limitations. Ask for help. Share your feelings, and let go of any perfectionism. Dr. Mary Lamia's book, Grief Isn't Something to Get Over, Finding a Home for Memories and Emotions After Losing a Loved One, is available online now and in select bookstores. For more behind the scenes, search Viewpoints Radio on Twitter and Facebook. This segment was written and produced by Polly Hansen. Our executive producer is Amira Zaveri. Studio production by Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson. Coming up next week.
I wasn't that mindful of how much sugar makes me crash in the afternoon, how much sugar makes me really jittery first thing in the morning.
The upsides of eating less sugar. Then,
that is not just something that we use for online gaming, booking holidays, or Netflix streaming, but it's really essential for many of our most basic rights.
The debate around subsidized internet. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.